Right. Welcome to this meeting of the Corporate Parenting Board. This meeting is being held remotely and members are in attendance via video conferencing. The meeting is being live streamed and will also be available for repeated viewing. I will begin by naming the members who are in attendance for the public record and asking members to confirm their attendance during the meeting. If a member wishes to speak, they will indicate this to me and I will call them to speak in turn. All agenda items are for noting today, and I will ask members to verbally indicate their agreement at the end of each item. I would like to remind members that the County Council standing orders continue to apply. To please keep your microphones muted unless you have been called to speak, and that you may be visible on the screen to the public and to other members even when you are not speaking. Have we any apologies today, please, Emma?
No apologies, Chairman.
Thank you. I will now call these members in attendance. Members, please unmute and confirm your attendance for the record and to ensure that you can be heard. I will confirm my attendance. Councillor Anne Briggs. Councillor Fran Carpenter.
Present, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Ross Chad.
Present, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Stephen Philpott.
Yes, I'm here, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jackie Porter.
Good afternoon, I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Patricia Stallard.
I don't think Councillor Stallard has joined us just yet, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Elaine Still.
Present, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Robert Taylor.
I don't think we have Councillor Taylor just yet either, Chairman.
Okay. And Councillor Malcolm Wade.
Present, Chairman.
Thank you. Declarations of interest. Members, if you have a disclosable pecuniary interest or a personal interest in any agenda item, please do declare this now or at the time of the item by indicating that you wish to speak. Confirmation of the previous minutes. At page 3 of the ModGov agenda pack are the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 16th of October 2020. Do members agree that these are a correct record? May I have a verbal agreement from members, please? Those for, against?
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you. There are no deputations today. In my chairman's announcements, I would just like to say that we were Corporate Parenting Board was contacted by Middlesbrough. I was contacted by the chairman of the Corporate Parenting Board. They'd been having some problems in Middlesbrough and they looked at the 5 best councils for children's services and to help them with their Corporate Parenting Board. So we've had a meeting with the lady there, Alma. It's a very difficult surname to pronounce, I'm not even going to try. And in future, we would like to work together and include other corporate parenting boards so we can talk about the best outcomes for our children, learning from one another. It was very interesting. We've had one meeting with Laura Mallison and Alma's the counterpart in Middlesbrough, and we would like to continue from there. Also, I've attended a supported lodgings meeting, HFN committee meeting, which is Hampshire's Fostering Network, and a support group. So now I would like to ask members, this is a standing item on the board's agenda, and it's an opportunity for you to provide some feedback on engagement activities that you have been involved in since the previous meeting. Does anyone wish to provide any feedbacks or updates? Do I see any hands? Councillor Carpenter.
Thank you very much, Chairman, Councillor Briggs. Thank you very much. Yes, since our last meeting, I visited virtually 2 places, I suppose you could call them, though one of them was very mixed places. The first one was to visit the high security establishment at Swanwick Lodge, where the manager of the service there, John Stacey, and one of the managers at the actual establishment there, David Lapage, showed me around virtually. We went round on Teams around the building, and they showed me where the children lived. They had, I think at the time they had just 2, but they were very high need children, older children. And that was a very interesting tour. And, you know, I saw their tuck shop, I saw where they lived briefly, because we couldn't go into all the units there because there were people in them. But, you know, these are children who have had a run-in with the law quite often, or are in danger of hurting themselves in some really fairly substantial way. And that was a very interesting visit, and I would highly recommend that people ask if they can go and have a look at Swanwick. And the second meeting I went to, second virtual visit I took, was a regional children in care's managers meeting with Councillor Porter, who I'm sure, and Councillor Wade, who I'm sure will also give their feedback. And that was hosted by Laura Mallinson, our officer. And it was interesting to hear what was going on around the different areas of Hampshire, different regions of Hampshire. Of course, there have been lots of challenges over lockdown. The managers have had to try to ascertain how children are doing through a screen, and that's not always easy. And I think that was one of the main challenges they've had, but they're doing it very well. But they can't always see the nuances that you would see or you would observe when you were face to face with a child or a family. But that was very interesting. I'll leave some for Malcolm and Councillor Porter to also put in as well, because I could talk for ages on that one. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carpenter. Councillor Wade.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I attended a accommodation visit for a facility run by Sport Fit Support Services on the 27th of October. In October, it was quite an interesting visit because it was a niche facility designed for the nuances of this young man's condition, because he looked after one young man. And they did a good job, and they were. You could see a very positive benefit the young man was getting for it. The challenge, I think, that we came at that visit, are they flexible enough to meet different needs of different young people? Because it really was a niche facility, and the things they were doing were so focused to this particular young man. But it was a very interesting visit, and the people that ran it worked very hard to make a positive difference to this young gentleman. And like Councillor Carpenter, I was in the virtual children managers meeting, and you know, it is interesting to see how the service is dealing with the impact of COVID and looking after children. And there's a lot of positive stuff. I mean, you know, the managers and the social workers are doing a good job, and it comes across a lot of positivity and enthusiasm, despite the challenges that we're all facing, and indeed the service faces, that they're being resilient in their efforts to do the very best for the young people. So it was an interesting meeting to see how they did it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wade. Councillor Philpott.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'm still getting used to this corporate parenting board thing. I had a meeting arranged at Fern
Fern Lodge in December, but unfortunately that was cancelled at the last moment, so which was a bit of a disappointment. I'm still hoping to rearrange that at some point, and I shall chase Laura up and see if I can get that done. I did, like you, attend the Hampshire Fostering Network, and that was very useful for me because it was an opportunity to meet some dedicated people, and so that was Bob and Lucy and Sue and Adrian and so on. And it was an opportunity there not only to meet those people, but to hear what they did. So I made some copious notes at the time, so it gave me a good deal of background as to the sorts of job roles and challenges that everybody has within the organisation. And that's really more or less what I have to report, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Philpott. Councillor Jackie Porter.
Thank you, and I think that probably Fran, Councillor Carpenter and Wade have described the meeting that we all attended very well. I think my disappointment in the meeting was that we weren't flies on the wall on that day. It was a meeting specifically for us to appraise of the situation, and I appreciate why to some extent that was the case, but I think in future with that group we would need to be a fly on the wall in those conversations to get something out of it that shows that we are truly scrutinising it as a corporate parent. I think it gave us a really good grounding in what the subject was about and how they felt at the moment, but we need to find out how young people feel at the moment as a result of the COVID work.
Thank you, Councillor Porter. It's something we can discuss perhaps later on with Laura Mallison. And hopefully when COVID is over, it will be so much easier because we'll be actually able to visit them. Thank you, everyone, for your reports. It's very, very interesting. And I would urge any member that hasn't attended anything to please do so. It's well worth listening to people, and you do learn a lot, as Councillor Philpott pointed out. Thank you. So now it's agenda item 7, Modernising Placement Programme. And I think we've got Amber James, please.
Thank you, Councillor Briggs. Can I just apologise that I'm having some IT issues and my camera isn't working. It's not, I don't want to put my camera on, I'm having a problem, so apologies for that. Okay, so thank you for the opportunity to present this paper this afternoon. I really want to introduce you to the Modernising Placements Programme, which is a large and fairly complex programme of work that we started in Children's Services in October 2019. And it's a transformational piece of work that's working in partnership with another of our transformation programmes, Transforming Social Care. And the objective of the programme is to help realise the vision for Hampshire County Council, that is that we ensure that children and young people have the best possible start in life. Where the focus of Transforming Social Care is about ensuring that children can remain safely at home. Sorry, can you hear me?
We can now. We lost you for a few minutes, Amber.
Sorry, I'm having some real technical issues this afternoon. Shall I start again?
Yes, please.
Sorry, you did hear that I'm having technical issues and I can't put my camera on.
Yes, we heard that.
Excellent. Okay, apologies. Yes, so I'd like to introduce you to the Modernising Placements Programme, which is a large and complex programme of work for Children's Services that started in October 2019. And it's working in partnership with the Children Families other transformational programme, Transforming Social Care, with the vision that for Hampshire County Council that we ensure that the children and young people that we have on our caseloads have the best possible start in life. So where the focus of Transforming Social Care is to ensure that more children can remain safely at home, the focus of the Modernising Placements Programme is to ensure that when we do have children come into our care, that they are provided with the most appropriate placement and support that enables them to go on and be successful adults. So both programmes are looking to make sure children can return home from care where it is safe and appropriate to do so. So whilst we may be having children coming into care, we are still looking at that within modernising placements, because we know that obviously things can change for families, and the work that we're doing whilst a child is in care could support a child to return home. Looking at paragraph 5 of the report, one of the reasons that we have started this piece of work is because we are so aware of the increasingly complex needs of children who are in our care, and obviously are the most vulnerable group of young people in society. We are at the moment in Hampshire operating on a sort of mixed economy of placements. So we have placements that are our own in terms of in-house fostering and residential care, and we also use private independent providers to support needs too. And obviously it is a local authority, is our statutory duty. We have a sufficiency duty to ensure that we have the right number and appropriate placements for children in care. Moving on to paragraph 6, just outlining that you'll be very aware, I'm sure, that there is a national shortage of placements, particularly where children have complex needs, and in Hampshire that's no different for us. We have continued to recruit foster carers, but in parallel we've kind of trying to match the children that are coming with complex needs. We've not been able to keep up with the demand, I guess, in terms of being able to recruit foster carers, and also because of the complex needs of children, that gives us some challenges in terms of placing them alongside other children in homes where we can find that we could destabilise a child if their needs were in conflict at the time. So what we've done over the last 12 months since the programme started is we've really undertaken some extensive research. So we've looked to capture what the challenges are for us in Hampshire so that we're putting the resource in the right place, and we've sought to understand what's happening both nationally and internationally in terms of what works for other local authorities and other countries in meeting the needs of children in care. And one of the strong drivers of this programme is that we get the voice of the child into the programme. So we started a piece of work last year that we're calling Expert by Experience. So it's the voice of the child, looking to bring children in to train them as researchers and then go out and talk to peers to find out what's important to them of being in care. Unfortunately, COVID stopped that piece of work for some time, but we've now recommenced it and kind of redesigned how we're going to do that. And alongside that, we are also talking to the Rees Centre from Oxford University about a proposal to bring in the voice of the family to the programme about what's important to them. There is very little research out there about what matters to parents and families of children who are in care, so we've been really keen that we incorporate that into our work. Paragraph 8 just identifies for you that the following issues that we've identified to work on. So as I've been talking about, we want to meet the needs of children with the most complex needs. We want to increase the number of Hampshire County Council foster carers. We want to increase the number of children that we have placed in our own children's homes. We see that we need to make improvements for staff recruitment and retention in our residential homes. Obviously, all of that, we want to improve the stability of care for our children. And then we want to respond to the needs of children who require urgent placements. And often finding placements for children who are in a crisis is difficult for us, and that's something that's a real priority for us to address. In paragraph 10, I have just described how we've managed to start some of this work, and that is through a Department for Education Partner in Practice grant, which really has helped us start the work, as we have also pulled together a business case and seeking corporate funding for service developments under the programme, which I'll take you through in a moment. We are due to go to Cabinet next week to seek corporate funding for these 4 service developments. So it's good news that it's been received well to get us to that position at the moment. just looking at paragraph 11 of the programme, and whilst in this paper I've only given you kind of a brief overview of the service developments that are in the business case, there is more work in the programme. So it's a very broad and wide-ranging programme. But initially, we are really looking to attract foster carers to come to Hampshire through an evidence-based renewed market strategy. And we then obviously once we've got foster carers with us, want to stay with us, and are really working on how we provide that wraparound support and finances to foster carers. That means that they are able to continue their caring role and develop in that role to meet the needs of our children. We've also got a really strong commitment to increasing the skills and resilience of our residential staff through specialist provision, but also looking at their work-life balance and the training that they need, again with that focus on their well-being, but also, you know, in terms of being able to meet the complex needs and making sure that they've got the skills to do that. And then an overarching aim of this programme is to really drive on ensuring a culture of shared values and shared skills across the department, across all placement types of services, so that we don't have distinctions in terms of how people view fostering, residential, or the staff and the carers that within them. Foster carers have told us a few times that, you know, they would like to become more about the team around the child, if you like, and some of this work is about bringing that online, so that they feel that they are part of that team and their views and experiences are being heard. So I'll just take you through quickly the 4 service developments which are proposed in the business case. The first one is looking at foster carer payments, and I'm sure many of you will be aware that we do pay like an allowance and a allowance for caring for the child, and also a fee in terms of recompensing the carer, recognising their skills. So we have a programme of work that is focusing on attracting more foster carers with a wider range of experience, and ensuring that when they do come to us, that they are sufficiently recompensed for that, and that they're not out of pocket in any way through the work that they do. We want to obviously increase the number of foster carers in Hampshire to make sure that we are placing more of our children with our own carers, so that they are closer to home, closer to their families, and not having to be placed, you know, in other counties in the country, which limits the work that we can do with them. And we also want to support carers to care for children with higher needs, which tends to be older children, who quite often the way in which their trauma comes through presents challenges to carers as they express themselves through their behaviours. The second service development is the Hampshire Hive, which is a foster carer network, and this is a support network for foster carers, which is based around replicating an extended family model. So like you have your grandparents, your aunts and your uncles in a normal family environment. This is about kind of trying to replicate that for children in fostering, so that they get to know each other far better, and the carers in that hive have support networks with each other, and children can have like sleepovers with other foster carers. We are just about to go out to recruitment for this, because we've used the DFE grant funding, so it's literally going to go live next week for recruiting for what we're calling a hive support worker and a hive respite carer. And the hive support worker will be somebody who has got at least 3 years fostering experience. So we're looking at people who foster, bringing them in an employed role to provide a wide range of advice, emotional and practical support, and working sort of across an extended week, working their hours across an extended week, sort of Monday to Saturday, 7 o'clock in the morning till 10 o'clock at night, so that we've got a much better range of availability and flexibility for responding to carers' concerns and giving them that support. They will then be partnered with a respite foster carer who will support those children in the hive by providing sleepovers and picking up any need for daycare if carers have got appointments or they need to go on training, etc. So it will be something, it'll be familiar carers that are looking after children within that hive. And we are hoping that we will have recruited 6 support workers and respite carers by the end of March. So we are really pushing on this because we think it's going to be really, really supportive of carers, and what carers, our existing carers, have told us so far is they're quite excited about this whole this model initiative. So we're fingers crossed it will work. It's not in the report, but just to mention alongside the Hampshire Hive in terms of what we're doing for foster carers, we're also looking at we've got foster talk membership now available to them, which gives them some independent support and advice. We're looking at their training, buddying, and also some culture and values work about how they work as foster carers with professionals. Moving on to the third service development is the psychological service and trauma-informed parenting. So this is a service that we are anticipating is led by a clinical psychologist, which will enhance how our looked after children are parented by foster carers and residential care staff. So it's really supporting children in placement by providing a consultation service to the people caring for them that helps those people caring for them to really get underneath why they are experiencing the behaviours that they are, and those behaviours can sometimes be really challenging for adults caring for them to understand, and can also impact on stability of placements. And we really want to get underneath that so that we can help carers have the support around them to feel resilient and able to continue caring for that child wherever possible. And the trauma-informed parenting will flow out of the psychological service too, around the whole social care workforce in terms of an understanding, so that everybody's talking the same language, everybody understands the impact of trauma, and can support those caring for our children on a day-to-day basis. And then lastly is the urgent and extended care service. So this part of the programme has been designed to respond to that issue that I mentioned at the beginning, which is around those young people where we find that they're in crisis and we can't find a placement for them. And that often means that we're not able to settle them quickly enough, and sometimes that can mean that their behaviours become more difficult to manage. They put themselves at greater risk. So these are a real priority cohort for us, and we're looking at designing a service, a 12-week assessment placement, repurposing one of our existing children's homes that will support children through giving an assessment of their needs, stabilising them with a multi-agency staff team around them, getting to know them, building a relationship with them, and then having some real dedicated resource in that service to make clear onward plans for them. Also attached to that service, because we've recognised that it's, you may settle a child in a particular service, but then when you move them again and you transition them on, they then become unsettled again, and that destabilises placement. So we've also put in an extended care service, which will provide some ongoing transition work to a child, particularly if they're moving on to a new placement. It will support them into that new placement and then remain with them as long as they need that support, with the interventions that have been used in the urgent service. And we're also expecting that urgent care service to work with our other children's homes to help support where there may be difficulties for children. So just to round up, it is a complex programme. We think it's a real positive changes that we're looking to embed. We're going to be building on what's already happened in Hampshire with the Hampshire approach, and we're hoping that through these dedicated resources we can improve choice and sufficiency of placements to children in care by increasing the capability of staff and foster carers caring for them, and keeping children more local. And as I said, we will be taking the paper will be going to Cabinet on the 9th of February. And we hope to start delivering the programme from the 1st of April. So I would recommend to the board that I bring an update in July 2021. I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Amber. I'm really pleased to hear about the urgent and extended care, and very happy to hear from you again in July. Members. I'm afraid I'm probably not going to do it in order, but I'm going to ask, the first one is Councillor Jackie Porter.
Thank you. And I thought this was a really good paper because it really does show that it's another area that we know needs to be tackled, and really pleased to see it, Amber. I had written down very clearly, I don't understand paragraph 6, but I think I do now better than when now you've described it. But paragraph 17 sounds a really good idea, but it's going to be really hard to recruit staff for that one. And I wondered if you wanted to comment on that. And also that at the end of the day, fostering can be a competitive market. We like to think that everybody does it for the right reasons, but there is also the money you get paid. And are we, if we look at comparisons, are we still doing a good job in that? And my third point is that there's a debate, isn't there, about why a children is in care if they have severe disabilities. And I wondered whether one of our planks of our plan should be that it is about supporting more parents to look after their own children, or is there a much more complex picture there?
Thanks. Thank you. Yes, in terms of staffing for the urgent extended care, you're absolutely right. We know it's going to be challenging. We have been doing some work with recruitment and also with other agencies such as CAMS to really think through how we do this. Actually what we're going to do is we think this is new and exciting because it's a new service. We are offering a lot more to our staff. We've got an offer of some really intensive dialectical behavioural therapy training to go into the staff that will be working in the home. So I think the offer in this service is better probably than has been out there, you know, otherwise. So I think hopefully that will attract people. But yeah, absolutely, we recognise there is a risk around that. In terms of your second point about fostering, and it is a competitive market, and the payments work that we've done has done the benchmarking work around whether or not we are competitive, because we know that for foster carers, yes, they do it for the right reasons, but they also need to live, and we need to make sure that we are competitive alongside that. So we've done that benchmarking work to make sure that we are headed in the right direction.
And then my third one was about the potentially supporting more parents to look after their own children, as we do with adults at the moment. So I
would say that's probably more for transforming social care, and that work's been happening into the transforming social care programme, and there's been a big piece of work around supporting parents of disabled children with different programmes, particularly when you think about severe disabilities, in giving them the resources and the support they need to keep children at home. Obviously MPP will also work with the parents of children in care. If it's appropriate, they will be returning home, and the extended care service could obviously give some support to those situations to ensure that they can care for children at home.
The picture's obviously complex, but I just wondered if you would give us an idea of the numbers of children that come in right from early age, or is it mainly coming in when they're older?
It's a mix. That we do have a higher ratio of young people coming in sort of 12, 13, 14 onwards, and that's where my point comes back really to. That's where we need to target our capacity, our capability for looking after older children with complex needs.
Thank you, that's really helpful.
Thank you.
Councillor Carpenter.
Yes, it came to light in one of my visits actually that we obviously have some very, very experienced staff who are specialists in certain areas, particularly sort of high needs settings as such. And they were talking about how sometimes it's quite unsettling for the children when those staff have to be at short notice redeployed somewhere else. Sometimes the staff have to stay away from home because they've got to travel over Hampshire, and they're deployed somewhere new, and they're taken away from the place where they probably have had the most impact and where they're most needed. And I just wondered what your thoughts were on trying to solve that issue. It seems to me that it is a bit of a problem that we may have talking to that staff member.
Yes, and as I've outlined, we recognise the fact that we've got a recruitment and retention issue, and we need to increase the numbers of staff that we've got. And you know, a knock-on effect of that has been that we've had to move staff to other homes to make sure that children are looked after. The programme's aim is to build that resilience, make Hampshire an attractive place for staff to come, putting in those additional resources to support them, like the extended care service into the children's homes. That means that, you know, staff hopefully they'll want to come to Hampshire. Firstly, because we have the right training and support around them. We'll have a sort of a flexible rostering system that means they can choose when they work and when they don't to get the right work-life balance. And then hopefully, you know, through attracting the right candidates into Hampshire and the support they get, we won't be in a position where we are losing staff. It's probably a particular issue at the moment as well. I know with COVID, it's really been felt in terms of staff, you know, and COVID.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Wade.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, it's a very good report. Thank you very much. The question I want to ask is, do we, because of special needs, do we still have a number of children placed out of the county? And if so, sort of how many? And has that gone up since the challenges brought on by the pandemic? And more of a long-term question, which may be difficult for you to answer, and I understand if you can't. Is there anything we can do to reduce this so we can deal with the more special needs at the very least within the boundaries of the county?
We do have, I think, about 120 children placed out of county. That's off the top of my head, so apologies if that's wrong. But that's roughly where we are. Stuart might come in if it's different. And the aim of the programme is really to build the capabilities of staff and the range of skills and experience they have in order to try and prevent the children being placed out of county. And you know, within the programme, we're also hoping that we might bring some children back from out of county into in-house provision, because we're, you know, obviously optimising our ability to do that. In terms of the pandemic, Stuart, can I come to you? I'm not sure whether we have placed more children out of county during the pandemic.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Councillor Wade, yes, around about 120. That number hasn't increased through the pandemic. Overall, I would say it's actually decreased. One of the reasons for that is because providers are not willing to take children. And I saw your sort of reaction around the 120. If you think that we have 1,650 approximately children in care, of those 120, some of those will be placed for very, very good reasons in very specialist placements that the local authority isn't able to commission locally. And an even smaller number of those may be placed at a distance from the local authority for their own safety, for obvious reasons when we talk about some of the exploitation that I know members cited on. Our aim, our overall aim of this package is, programme rather, is yes, indeed, to have more children either back at home or placed in provision within Hampshire. But we have to recognise and accept that we will never have enough of our own local authority provision for all of our looked after children. That's just simply not viable. But I think longer term, we're certainly aspirational that those numbers will reduce who are in specialist placements outside of the area.
Thank you. Okay.
Councillor Stallard. I'm sorry, Jackie. Councillor Porter, is your hand still up? Have you another question? Thank you.
Are you speaking to me, Chairman?
Yes, your hand's just gone up,
Yeah.
Councillor Stallard.
Yes, right. I've got about 4 small questions here, and I think they might be for Stuart and or Steve Crocker, if he's here. If I can just refer very briefly to paragraph 7, in which you make reference to the expert by experience researchers, which I think is a really good idea. But the training has had to be put on hold because of COVID, but I understand it's now resumed. When do you think that training might be completed, and how soon will those researchers be in the field, so to speak? That's my first question. My second question is paragraph 8, where you talk about the need to make improvements for staff recruitment and retention in our residential homes. Well, yeah, have we got a plan? How are we planning to do that? How are we planning to make those improvements for staff recruitment and retention? Is there some kind of action plan already set out somewhere? The third question is to do with the psychological service and trauma-informed parenting. Again, another excellent initiative and very much welcomed, I'm sure, by those who will benefit from it. But it says in paragraph 15 that it's a new service. And again, when will that be up and running? What is the time frame on that? Because it doesn't really indicate what the time frame on that. And finally, my last question is paragraph 17. It talks about repurposing a children's home in order to support young people with very complex needs. Well, if we are going to repurpose an existing children's home, what are the implications of that? I.e., what is the knock-on effect to other homes or other children who might be waiting? Thank you.
I think Steve is here. I'm not sure, Steve, if you wanted to come in or you.
I'm handing this one straight over to you, Stuart, because I know you've got the detail on it.
And I think Amber, I'll be bringing Amber back in very quickly for the level of detail. In terms of the first question, which was expert by experience, it's just unavoidable, Councillor Sallard, that the pandemic has got in the way of this. Timescales, we're optimistic that by the middle of the spring we'll be able to bring that work stream online. But it's just been really unfortunate. But we recognise the value that those young people and others will bring to the programme. It's really important, and it's been on our radar for a year, so I can assure you that it's a top priority in that regard. In terms of retention and recruitment of residential workers, it's part of a large piece of work looking at our whole workforce. It's easy to say that it's about money, but the feedback from our staff is it's not about the financial reward. Yes, that's important, and we have to recognise that we are in a marketplace with independent providers. But the reality is it's the home work-life balance that is the biggest issue. We have taken some steps already to increase the numbers of staff within our children's homes, because that gives more flexibility around the rota. But what Amber went on to describe is the next stage of that, where we're looking to bring even more flexibility to that workforce so they can choose when they work, recognising they have commitments at home. And then the last strand of our strategy around it is the idea of the trauma-informed parenting. You know, we have residential staff working with some exceptionally damaged and troubled children, and you need specialist training and specialist tools. Members will be aware through our transformation programme, we've given those specialist tools to our social workers. Part of this programme is giving those specialist tools to our foster carers and to our residential workers. The third question was about the psychological service. We would want it to be online as soon as possible. We recognise that actually the recruitment of a psychologist for the service will be a challenge. It's a challenge nationally. What I would say is the longest timeline is April 22. We aim, of course, to have it in and up and running before then, but we have to also be realistic that the time we've recruited somebody, recruited other hosts to work alongside them, that might be a slightly longer term piece of work, but we're optimistic it will be this year. And your final question was around the repurposing of one of our children's homes. The knock-on effect, I think, was the question. Well, clearly that would reduce capacity in our residential service overall, because we will be looking at only having 2 beds in that children's home as opposed to the 4 that it's currently registered for. What I would say is the occupancy levels in our children's homes generally are not as high as we would wish for this very reason, that children go into crisis and therefore you can't bring other children into that home. By having our own, and this is my phrase, our own crisis home, we can then make sure that the other homes have better capacity. So we think overall it won't have an adverse impact on the capacity of our children's homes generally. And I have to say, I think this is a really important strand of this programme. Very often, increasingly so, we are seeing children who are not known to children's social care, they may not be known to CAMS, going into exceptional crisis, and we are having to, well, we don't know these children, we are having to find placements, and it goes back to Councillor Wade's point. Sometimes we have to place them in a specialist home somewhere outside of Hampshire because that's what's available. This will give us the capacity to put a wraparound service around those children in the deepest crisis locally in Hampshire.
I think that's important because A, it'll be nearer to home, but B, it'll be more efficient for the council. Thank you.
Councillor Porter.
Thank you. I understand the need about putting them into crisis homes, and I will definitely, give rise to or certainly understand Stuart's very clear experience on this. But we know that this can happen here and there relatively randomly as well as building up. And I wondered what the criteria is that makes you decide that this child is going to be moved home potentially yet again to a crisis home. And it sounds quite simple, but it's not. It's going to be much more nuanced than that, I'm sure. That's my first question. The second one is, why are we calling young people care experienced now, which is what comes out in the paper twice, who have experience of care, but care experienced is an interesting way of describing someone. I don't think it's necessarily not necessarily some way I would like to be. I'd like to be described.
I think I'll deal with the second question first, if I may, Councillor Porter. It's a sign of the times, I suppose, is my answer. It's something that's being used increasingly nationally, and some young people have said that's how they prefer to be called rather than care leavers or a child in care. I agree with you, but that might be because I'm used to always having been called young people being called care leavers or children in care. But it is increasingly a phrase that you will see across the literature around children's social care. In terms of your first question, the sort of nuances around, well, who, and it felt as if you were describing it as a negative move. Who will be moved into another placement? I think we need to be clear that the urgent and extended care model has two really big benefits. One is it's a short-term placement to allow stability, so that we can put the right resource around the child so that they can go back to their original placement or return home. It's not about them ending a placement. So, for example, if we have a child in one of our children's homes, that's their long-term placement, for a variety of reasons they go into crisis, rather than disrupt all of the children, or in worst case scenario, that children's home saying we can't manage this anymore, we could place them in this model for a short period of time, re-engage them and then return them to their original long-term placement, or indeed return them home.
Because we know that once you've made a vacancy though in a place, it's hard to leave that vacancy there. So is that why you're setting a particular length of time, or?
No, the point about vacancies, I think it feels as if that's changed over the years, Councillor Porter. I think we recognise, particularly with our own children's homes and foster placements, that if that's the child's long-term placement and for whatever reason they need to temporarily leave, we respect that placement. Their bedroom is still there with their possessions in it. Okay. So we take a different approach nowadays, I think.
Okay, good, thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any more hands up, so thank you very much, Amber, for your presentation. Members, thank you. Members, I'm not reading out the recommendations because I believe you will have read them. So can I have your verbal agreement that you agree to the recommendations, please? Any?
Agree.
Everyone's for?
Agree.
No one's against, no one's abstaining. Thank you, members. We now go on to the HCC annual report for care leavers, which is being given by Kim Gardner. Thank you.
Hi everyone. Hopefully you can all hear and see me okay.
Thank you, Kim.
Wonderful, thank you. So the purpose of the report is to provide the Corporate Parenting Board with an annual report of the activity of the care leaver service from January 2020 to December 2020 inclusive. This is the first report that has been commissioned and will ensure that the board has a full overview of the achievements, progress and challenges in meeting the needs of Hampshire care leavers. In terms of the report, it was authored in December, and at that point there were 758 care leavers open to Hampshire Children's Services at that time. In terms of the report, it sets some context for care leavers within Hampshire, so kind of outlines who a care leaver is in terms of young people aged 18 to 25 who have been in care as a child, outlining the 4 different categories for care leavers and the associated support that they receive. We provided some geographical data and also just some data around the young people themselves. So we do have more males than females who are care leavers open to our service, and we also provided some information on ethnicity with the largest cohort being white British young people. In terms of the report, it was really aimed at kind of talking to the activity and also the hopes of the service in terms of the corporate parenting responsibilities of all agencies to children in care, and our real focus within Hampshire County Council of ensuring the best possible outcomes for our young people. It draws the board's attention to our Children in Care pledge and our pledge to care leavers, and there are links to that within the document, and also our local offer to our young people. And this local offer is a statutory requirement whereby we publicise our statutory offer to young people. For example, the support we offer in terms of higher education, financial support. So the local offer is kind of centred on a number of key principles. So the need for young people to have a pathway plan to independence and a successful future, their health and well-being, relationships, education and training, employment and money, accommodation and participation in society. In terms of kind of the report, it is quite long because obviously I think it has been a busy year, and it was actually a really enjoyable experience putting it together and kind of reflecting on the year, despite the kind of situation that we find ourselves in terms of COVID. In terms of kind of some key areas that we focus on in the report is kind of focusing on the things that are important to our young people. So what they tell us that is super important is their accommodation, their money, and their kind of aspirations. Like those are the key things that they really want to know information about, and are also crucially important in terms of their kind of success as young people. So I've included some information around staying put, which is where children in care who become 18 have the ability to stay in their fostering family, but the kind of arrangements change because obviously they are adults within that household at that point, and the placement becomes staying put with that foster carer providing a kind of host to the young person within that household. So that is something that we look to kind of heavily promote to young people, and obviously part of our modernising placement agenda will be also reviewing staying put. In terms of accommodation, we did receive some funding whereby we were able to have a focus on homelessness prevention, which is a really important government drive at the moment. And with that funding from the Ministry of Housing, we created 4 specialist posts promoting accommodation stability for young people. So we've identified those posts as homelessness prevention personal advisors, and these posts have run from September 2019 and they run to March 21. At the moment, we don't have any further indication of funding of those posts. So without any extension to funding, those will end at the end of March. And so our focus at this time is looking at translating that activity of those workers into business as usual within our care leaver teams. Those posts have been really successful. They've been really looking at driving that partnership working with our local housing departments, and we have really seen a strengthening of those links, which is tied into our joint housing protocol. We also have done a lot of partnership engagement work, so really kind of promoting the idea of corporate parenting to our partners to look at a local level at no cost, what could we do? Because we are all working with the same young people. So, you know, somebody who is working with us may be having input from the DWP, they will be having access to health services. So these young people have lots of contacts with people, and it's looking at kind of seeing how best we can coordinate that support. And that kind of brings us to the idea of Journey to Independence, which has been our project stream in terms of really concentrating our focus around that really important period of transition. As we know that, you know, for children in care and our care leavers, you know, from the age of 16, they are having to think about their future in a way that their peers don't have to. You know, they're thinking about, you know, where they might be when they're 18, where are they going to live, you know, what are the options for them. And we know that ordinarily lots of children are staying at home long into their adulthood and are often not making that transition, you know, even to their mid-teens, mid-20s, sorry. So it is a very kind of different picture for our care leavers. We've developed a tool to help assess attendant and independent skills for our young people, and we're working closely with our placement commissioning team and our support needs assessments for young people. So really making sure that those transitions are really thought about, planned and well matched. Other kind of engagement events that we've been looking at is our work with the DWP. There's a really strong offer within the DWP presently thinking about kind of the many issues people are facing around employment, but we do have a partnership officer who's linked into Hampshire, and they are really focused on that offer to care leavers. So there are a number of kind of interventions that we're really looking to kind of focus our young people who are sadly not in education, employment or training presently. Another kind of area of development for the service is the enhancement of the offer to support young people to attend university. And that resulted from a young person kind of participating and sharing their views about the barriers that they felt were there for care leavers in terms of accessing university. And they actually had a meeting with Stuart whereby they kind of talked about their personal experiences of trying to be a young person at university without necessarily that stable family background, you know, as a support system around them. And that has resulted in additional funding being allocated to young people, which constitutes the payment of their weekly living allowance. So most universities will publish what they have as a living cost, and we will meet that, and we will also provide them a personal allowance payment. And really the kind of motivation around that is to kind of limit some of the debts that young people will be experiencing, you know, and we know that's daunting for all students, but for young people who don't have that support system around them, you know, it can be a non-starter. So that's really important. So we're really trying to minimise the maintenance loans of young people, you know, and support them to kind of achieve their full potential. Other areas of development, we've had lots of councils fantastically look at council tax reductions or exemptions for young people. So we now are far more weighted in those offering designated offer to care leavers, which is fantastic. We've also been doing some work with health with regard to young people. So often knowing that our young people leaving care don't always have a good understanding of their health histories, and sort of consulting young people. Some young people are asking for more information. You know, they don't necessarily have someone to refer to say, did I have this when I was a child? You know, was I in hospital? You know, did I have, you know, an operation? So it is about making sure that they have access, but also more importantly, the access to parental health. So, you know, we often find that care leavers, if they're having a health scare, you know, they want to know kind of what genetically might be impactful for them, but they may not have that information at hand. So it's also just, you know, helping young people be aware of where information can be sourced for, getting access to their GP records, etc. So that is something that we're launching for 2021. In terms of COVID, you know, we are acutely aware that COVID is having a massive effect on everybody. But we are, you know, very conscious of our care leaving young people, thinking about especially those living in more semi-independent or independent living, and thinking about kind of the networks of support available to them. And obviously we are, you know, utilising technology to make sure that we are keeping in touch with our young people. And actually we found that many of our care leavers have really enjoyed that online interaction with their personal advisors, because it's kind of their social world. They're used to those platforms. That's how they like to communicate. So actually it's kind of been a way of kind of inviting us into their world. And I think, you know, what we have seen is, you know, young people playing, you know, their guitar down a video stream to their personal advisor, you know, lots of kind of, you know, sharing of things that might not ordinarily take place face to face. We are, of course, maintaining a face-to-face option for those young people that need it. We know, particularly for people with mental health needs, that actually, you know, sometimes that online interaction is not appropriate or doesn't meet need, you know, and that social isolation is there. So throughout these times, we have considered every visit, every young person, and prioritise that according to need. In terms of kind of other kind of bits and pieces, obviously the report does kind of detail how we done Christmas this year, slightly different, you know, in terms of COVID and kind of how that happens. But, you know, the county council staff were fantastic. So despite not being in offices, our kind of drive for donations was as strong as ever. We filled a room in E2, as we would normally do, with people sending things into the office, which was really great. And we had 2 of our Christmas elves out in a van delivering gifts to our young people. So we were kind of not going to let COVID put pay to Christmas. So I suppose that's kind of a good note to end on. In terms of kind of the year ahead, you know, we continue to be aspirational, you know, hear the views of young people and want to continue to design a service that meets their need. Open to any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. My hand's just gone up. Councillor Carpenter. You're muted, Fran.
Thank you very much for that report. That was really, you know, I've read it through and it's really full, and there's lots of information about what we do for our care leavers. And in my area in the New Forest, I was really pleased that about 18 months or so ago, maybe a little bit more now, it seems like yesterday, but of course we've had all sorts in between, the district council decided to give full exemption to care leavers from council tax. And it looks like there are still 3 councils, it says Rushmore, Hart and Gosport, who are still not actually providing for care leavers specifically. And I just wondered whether we could possibly, Chairman, send the report to the leaders of all the district and borough councils, just to draw their attention to this really excellent report and show what we do, but also propose that those 3 remaining councils are specifically requested to waive council tax for their care leavers. I just thought it might be a good time to do it, and this is a good report to put to them to show that actually everybody else is on board.
Thank you for that proposal, Councillor Carpenter. May I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Wade. Thank you. Do all members agree?
Agree.
Chairman,
Agree.
I think I would probably have to declare an interest as a district councillor at Gosport Borough Council on a matter of that. We've got our budget coming up, and I don't think it would be appropriate for me to be voting matters relating to council tax in Gosport from Hampshire County Council in that context.
Thank you, Councillor.
I shall declare an interest on that and not participate in any vote, please.
Yes, understood. May I ask everyone else, please, if they agree? Thank you.
Agree.
Agree. Thank you. Is that the end of your questions, Councillor Carpenter?
Yeah, I think so. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Jackie Porter, please.
Thank you. And I was just going to put my hand up to do the same as Councillor Philpott. I declare a personal interest because I'm on the cabinet at Winchester, so I'm really pleased that they are one of the ones that are now giving council tax. I just want to say, in fact, it's an extension really of what Councillor Carpenter was saying, that when we speak to the local housing officers and the local teams generally, they know very little really about the experience of a care leaver or care experienced person, should I explain that? And I think that that's really something to be a concern to me, actually, that you've moved this service on hugely, even in the time since I've been a county councillor. And I now feel that we really do understand that young people shouldn't be treated equally. They should be given a real bump up when they're moving out of care. And too often they go, oh, well, actually, they don't have the life skills to live on their own. They don't have the life skills to live independently. Well, you're working very, very hard to make sure they do. So my question is, how do you communicate all this to district councils? And could we be, as a number of us are double hatters, how could we be really helpful in achieving that with you?
Shall I start, Kim, and then do come in, or Steve, of course. We've written to all leaders and chief execs of the district and borough councils, offering for officers to come and do a presentation on care leavers and the corporate parenting responsibilities that sit with the district and borough councils as much as they do with the county council. We were invited to, I believe, and Kim will correct me, Basingstoke and Rushmore. I know that we've done presentations. Councillor Porter, I know you were pre-pandemic arranging for us to come and speak to Winchester. We have regular communications with the senior housing officers group, so we do have good links. But I think in terms of increasing the knowledge and awareness of care leavers, then the more that members of this committee can do to bring officers in touch with those local members, I think that would be a really positive thing. And I actually think that's part of the responsibility of this board.
Point taken.
Thank you. Councillor Stellard.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I would endorse what Stuart has just said. We have made many contacts over the years with district authorities and boroughs about this, and the numbers offering council or waiving council tax relief for our care leavers has slowly risen, but it has been a slow rise. But I do agree with the other point about housing officers being kept well informed, and I think that's absolutely essential. I will have an offline chat with Stuart and with Steve Crocker to see if we can set up something, if we can invite housing officers along and set something up direct with the housing officers, because I feel so often that communications which are sent to the districts and boroughs don't necessarily meet those, fall into the hands of those people for which they are intended. So if you don't mind, Chairman, I'd be quite happy if you would leave that particular item with me, and I will press forward as hard as I can to get something set up with direct with housing officers. If I can just carry on there, I've just got two questions this time. You'll be pleased to hear if I can find them. Where are they? Yeah. paragraphs aren't numbered, but it's the one headed homeless. It's on page 21. It's headed homelessness prevention personal advisor. From what you say, Kim, and from what you've written here, these people seem to be absolutely critical to helping young people make that easier transition and to get on their feet, especially as they enter adult life. But you've already pointed out the funding at the moment looks set to end in March of this year. We don't know whether the funding will be extended, but if we work on the premise that it's not extended, what plans are being made? And this might be Stuart again, I don't know. What plans are being made if that funding is discontinued? Because we can't just simply leave young people hanging in midair. And the other thing I'd like to ask, on page 22, under the heading of Education, Employment and Training, you very sadly, but quite rightly, make the note that care leavers continue to experience poor educational outcomes. And I wondered, and if we have got it, I would love to have a copy of it. Do we have any Hampshire data on that? Do we have any tabulated data or information that we could look at to see what they do achieve, or perhaps what they fail to achieve? I don't know.
I see Steve has got his hand up to reply to you.
Well, I don't have the data to hand, but there's a although we might do. I don't know if anybody else does, because we do keep records of children that are NEET and also their education attainment. Did I see Nicola's on the line? So Nicola, who's our new head of the virtual school, might want to come in, but she may not have the data to hand. My point, though, what I was going to say is there is a trap that we all fall into, including myself in this, but we've all got to watch out for, in comparing care leavers with the average population. And when we do that, care leavers often don't come out as well as the average population, and indeed children in care, same thing. When you do a more sophisticated study that starts to compare children in care and care leavers with their peers in the community, and we have to remember that children often come from difficult and sometimes damaged backgrounds, then care leavers actually tend to fare pretty well in comparison with their community, their like community peers. So that's an interesting one. And the other thing that is also tricky in this regard is that sometimes the numbers are a bit reverse engineered. So we often get thrown at us the one that something like 40% of people in prison are care leavers of some sort or other. That doesn't mean that 40% of care leavers go to prison. It's the other way. Actually, it's a very small number. And because you're looking at a smaller cohort through a different lens. Actually, the majority of care leavers don't go anywhere near prison. It's only something like 7% actually get into trouble. And I know it's one of the things that sometimes care leavers say to me when I meet them, is that they get a bit tired with being tarred with those sorts of brushes. And when we look at their individual life experiences, and many of those care leavers go on to university and bring up families and do it extremely successfully, we see a different picture. So I suppose what I'm saying is we just need to be careful about the lens through which we look at the care leavers' life experiences, because looking at it through different lenses tells us different stories and different narratives. And I want to be clear that very many care leavers go and have successful adult lives.
Yeah, can I just make the clear point, Chairman? What I was looking for were the achievements. Let me put it that way.
Yeah.
Not the comparisons with, but the achievements of our care leavers. Doesn't matter whether they're very low grades or very high grades, but I would like us to have an overall picture of their achievements. Indeed, as Steve has already said, some of them go on to university. Now, all those things at whatever level are cause for celebration, yeah. Something positive. Exactly. And that's the way I wanted us to look at it.
Thank you.
So do we have access to that information? That's what I'm asking. On a positive basis, on an achievement basis.
If I can come in and answer that, and I'll bring Kim in as well. Kim actually knows the data, and our data around, and I know it's not just about data, Councillor Stanley, but our data reflects strong performance of our care leavers who are engaged in education, employment and training. And I just want to reiterate, the best example I can give you is around university. That's a real achievement of our care leavers, and that number increases year on year. That's just one example. We have lots and lots of examples of their successes. And I think it's a helpful prompt, actually. Perhaps we should include some of those in this report going forward, so that it gives some of those positive stories.
Exactly.
You want to share the data, because I think it's a strong story.
Yes, so in terms of 17 and 18-year-olds, we have 70% who are in education, employment and training. And for 19 to 21-year-olds, it's 68%. So there's kind of parity there within those figures. So I think, you know, we are working really hard at supporting our young people. And I think, Councillor Sannard, you definitely have a point there. There are lots of wonderful success stories. And I'm sure that our care leavers would really like to share them with you. So we can certainly take that offline and think about how we can feed that back into the board.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Wade.
Sorry, there was that.
Sorry, I thought you'd. Sorry, Jack.
The first question I asked him.
Yes, thank you. So we are looking at a business as usual approach. Quite positively, in terms of the recruitment to those posts, 2 of the staff members were already Hampshire County Council staff members, so they were already personal advisors. So the benefits of that mean that then going back into their formal roles in the care leaver teams, they can take all of that knowledge basis they have developed in terms of that specialist housing knowledge. And we are looking at them retaining a lead for housing within their teams. There's also potential for the third worker and the 2 external candidates to potentially come into those teams as well. So what we really want to do is retain the knowledge, but also the partnerships, because I think that's absolutely right in terms of those relationships of housing officers, because those workers, in terms of that prevention of homelessness, are working directly with those housing officers, and it's those relationships that often, you know, afford opportunities. But I think it's extending that beyond there. So I think, yes, we will be certainly retaining the knowledge.
Thank you. That's excellent. Thank you.
Councillor Wade.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, excuse me. Yes, I mean, that's an excellent report of all the hard work you do. I just want to, for a moment, go back to the bit about districts. Pardon me. About in the latter part of 2019, about the time New Forest decided to help out care leavers with council tax, I raised the issue with the chief exec of the New Forest District Council, and indeed the district council itself in the council meeting, about the lack of knowledge in district and borough council members of their responsibility for looked after children, and it was accepted. And they said, well, they're going to do a training course on it. We're going to train our district councillors to it. Well, clearly the pandemic's got in the way, and that didn't happen. And I just imagine, through no fault of their own, there is a large amount of ignorance about district council members about looked after children and any influence they may or may not have with them. And housing is one of the biggest areas. You're quite right in identifying that, but it's not the only one. And what I've wondered is if the county could, and I looked at the senior officers for this, provide some form of training that we could give out to the districts, so that they could, the district councils could understand. Because we come as a district or borough council, one comes across looked after children in different environments, and if you knew a little bit more about where they came from, understanding how to help and support them would be a bit easier. And I just wonder, the county is probably best placed to do this. Could we put something together to give out to the districts, to cascade down to all their members, to enlighten them to their responsibilities as a corporate parent? Because I'm pretty certain they haven't a clue, for the most part. Chairman.
I'll start, and others will come in, I'm sure. There certainly is, and that was the purpose of the briefings that we offered for officers to go out to the districts to undertake. I'd be reluctant just to send out a link, an online link to a sort of programme, because I think it really is about having the discussions and understanding the nuances around children in care. We sometimes get asked, well, can we know the names of the children in care in our district? And of course, that becomes quite a sensitive issue then, doesn't it? Because we have our children in care have a right to anonymity and confidentiality. But we are very happy indeed to come to any district council and offer a series of briefings. It can cover basic safeguarding, children in care, care leavers, corporate parenting responsibilities, a range of children's issues that are important for district members to understand. I don't know, Kim, whether you want to add anything to that, or Steve, but that seems to me to be the best approach.
And we obviously recently facilitated a kind of an engagement project with the community. So we did develop a presentation, and we've kind of got various working groups. So we've got some materials to support with that as well, depending on the direction we take forward.
Chairman, can I just come back? I totally understand what Stuart said. What I was looking for, rather than sending a link, is the county. The districts don't know what they don't know, and unless we go forward to suggest, listen, we want to share with you this as a positive action, rather than waiting for them to come to us, can we go to them as a way of helping the situation along? That's all. I know it is a challenging times with COVID, but is there a way we could do that? I think that will be a good way.
And I don't wish to be as if I'm not answering the question, but we have. And we have, and we have, and we have. And I suppose I'm at the point where I'm saying, what more can officers do, or indeed the lead member or the director, because we have written and we've said we are really happy to come, spend time and help you understand your responsibilities that we want to support you with. So if Malcolm, if New Forest District Council want to invite myself and Kim and others, we'll be there and we'll walk through and answer questions and explain.
Well, I promise I'll ask them.
Yes, I would just like to step in there, because before COVID came in, I had an invitation from Basingstoke to go along and speak about our corporate parenting board. And I have had quite a few talks with Stuart, and my own area haven't. Councillors don't realise their responsibility towards our care leavers. And members can do so much, because again, COVID has got in the way. The local leisure centre, which was willing to give a good reduction to our care leavers. So there's so much that we can all do. And I just noticed that Pal Hare's hand came up somewhere. Are you there, Pal?
I am indeed, yes. Yeah, if it's okay, may I just say a couple of things? Thank you very much for that report, Kim. That's really, really comprehensive and very good. And I'm really pleased that you did something for Christmas for the children, and they gave Christmas gifts. That's really, really good news, because they have a difficult life anyway. So it's nice to have something good. Just about the Hampshire demographic, the age and gender, there seem to be more males than females. Is there a history of that, and has there been any research into that? Why there's a big difference between males and females in care? And the other question I wanted to ask was, will the COVID pandemic impact on the mental well-being during the transition to independent living for the care leavers? Thank you.
Should I start with the demographics, and then I'll typically Hampshire is not unusual in terms of its gender split around children in care, and therefore care leavers. Typically, we are almost exactly what you would find across England. Typically, there are more males that come into care than females, and of course, one of the things that is probably just slightly changing for us in Hampshire over the last 2 years, we have been working on a programme of reunification for children. And more children are going back home and they're not becoming a care leaver, if that makes sense. that just might be starting to change our demographics around care leavers, but we're not in any way an outlier. I can see Steve wants to come in.
Well, the other factor is that I haven't got the numbers right in front of me, but over the last many years, we've had over 200 odd young people who are unaccompanied asylum-seeking children who become care leavers. They're overwhelmingly male, and that will probably skew the numbers.
That's exactly it. Now you say it. I think we've only had 2 or 3 females out of that whole cohort, so that will definitely skew it.
Councillor Jackie Porter.
Sorry, there was a second.
Oh, sorry, I thought you'd finished.
Yeah, sorry, my second question about the mental well-being. What sort of support is provided during their transition?
Do you want to answer that, Kim? Because that's...
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously our pathway planning with our young people starts when they're 15 years, 9 months, so kind of ready to tick in place for 16. So although they will make that transition at 18, potentially in terms of movement from a child in care to being a care leaver, the transition process starts much earlier. So it's looking at relationship building with their personal advisor throughout that period of time, because obviously they have both a social worker and a personal advisor allocated during the time that they are 16 to 18. So it gives a feel for the support that will be available to them in the future. I think it's about knowing their options, knowing what the provision available is, because I think that's really important in terms of reducing anxieties for the future, is being clear on what their options are. So really trying to, you know, take that cliff edge away almost, because it's talked about in care leavers, you know, 18, 21, and now we've got the extended duties to 25, so that we can be alongside that large process of transition that happens from 16 to 25. We're obviously working hard with partners, and I know that you have CAMS coming to present later on today. So obviously it's looking at that children in care offer being available, you know, for those young people. I think that transition between children and adult services in those kind of sectors is more tricky, because, you know, a young person open to CAMS may not be accessing a service post 18 because of the different threshold criteria that are in place. We're doing a lot of kind of engagement work locally with looking at wellbeing centres and kind of what provision is out there locally, because there are lots of kind of voluntary and community kind of offers. So it's really kind of enhancing what we can kind of layer into that package of support. We are looking to potentially trial other forms of independence building, independence work, but ultimately linking into Amber's paper, it's looking at that kind of preparation work and that journey through care, and the support that we can, you know, provide young people in that fostering experience, having those solid people around them to support them, you know, layered by the professionals. So it's certainly not something, Councillor Hare, that we've you know, cracked to date, but it is something that, you know, is very much on our radar. I don't know if anyone wants to add anything further.
Could I just very briefly add, Chairman, the fact that I think the other bit that we're working very hard on is ensuring that we get the right CAMS provision when children are younger and in care. Because if we get the foundations right, then as they move into adulthood, then arguably we continue with that being correct. Because I think Kim's absolutely right. The threshold difference between what we will support in terms of our children in care and our young adults up to the age of 25 is very, very different to whether or not they would meet the threshold for a support, you know, support networks within adult social care. So if we get it right from the point at which they come into care, then arguably it will go through their journey and their life and their transition into adulthood. So we're working hard on that as well.
Thank you, Steph. Right, Councillor Jackie Porter.
Thank you. One question I didn't ask earlier on is, I was pleased to see the list of approaches that you take, but one is about financial affairs, which I was really pleased to see on there. I wondered how far that goes in the sense of what support they can have for insurance, bank account, that sort of thing, when they don't necessarily know where they're going to be living, because that sort of thing takes a long time to set up. And I wondered how that's set up with young people when they leave care, or if indeed we do that and we only, or do we wait until they come back to ask for help?
So,
yeah,
absolutely. So obviously, in terms of preparing young people for their kind of financial stability and security moving forward, from the age of 16, after they finish school, so that kind of summer term, young people receive a personal allowance. So that's irrespective of whether they live in foster care, semi-independent living or post-16. And obviously part of that is that they're supported to access a bank account. Now, generally that would be via the person that's providing their accommodation. So they would be, you know, and we would be expecting through that journey through care that children in care have savings, you know, they are encouraged, you know, as all good parents do, you know, help build those early skills in terms of money management. Obviously, then when they're 16, they receive a personal allowance. And obviously, again, that's around independence building. And also what we have looked at is working with sort of government endorsed agencies around money management. There's a lot of online courses, for example, and we trialled one last year that went down really well with our young people. So the plan is that we're going to look to offer 4 of those this year. So they're facilitated by an external agency. A member of the care leaver service recruits the young promotes the event, gets the young people online, and we're there to be an adult sort of on that online meeting, but looks at kind of, you know, money management. And in a way, the virtual aspect is good because obviously money management is virtual now, isn't it? And so, but it talks about ISAs, it talks about savings, talks about mortgages. So we are trying to sort of layer up that thing because we are aspirational. And I think going on Steve's comments, we have young people that are doing absolutely amazingly and are making really good choices and, you know, really kind of, you know, doing well. But I think it is about making sure that they do have, you know, those kind of opportunities available to them, because there may be gaps in terms of their kind of care history where there are some knowledge gaps that we would want to fill. So yeah, we're kind of trying to utilise everything that's out there to support our young people as much as we can.
Okay.
Right, that is the end of the questions. Kim, thank you very much for such a comprehensive report. And I would just like to say that I think we need to celebrate some of the achievements of our care leavers more than we do, because I know as Councillor Carpenter and Councillor Wade, some of the things that we have done in the past, we have got some extremely talented care leavers, and I think we do need to celebrate them. So thank you, Kim. Members, thank you. Can I have your verbal agreement for the recommendations, please?
Agreed.
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 Thank you.
Agreed.
Thank you. No against, no abstentions. Okay. The next report is from Hampshire Child and Adolescent Mental Health Services, which is going to be reported by Leo Cooper. I'm not sure if I pronounced the name right, so apologies if I haven't.
Hi there, good afternoon. Yes, that is pronounced correctly, yeah. So thank you for having me. My name's Leo Cooper, as you said. I'm the head of the Hampshire Child and Adolescent Mental Health Service. So hopefully in your packs there'll be a summary report which is based on a fuller report which is presented to our internal leadership team around May time. So this report covers the 2019-20 financial year. The report just gives a bit of context to the child in care team. So we have 7 community teams across Hampshire with 8 bases, and within each of those teams is a child in care therapist, and they're integrated into the CAMS teams. So the delivery model across the country can be slightly different. Sometimes there are dedicated children in care teams, and sometimes they're integrated into core CAM services. We've continued to have our children care therapists integrated into our core CAM services. That does bring some benefits, so that young people that access our service can access the range of activities that can be undertaken by the wider community CAMS team. So, for example, psychiatry input and things like that. The report goes on just to highlight the overarching clinical model that's used within the teams, which is essentially a trauma-informed approach, and based on a framework which put some quotes in here about what has happened to you rather than what is wrong with you. That's kind of the core approach. In terms of some contextual information, the reality is our children care resources relatively small. There's about one child and care therapist within each of the community CAMS teams, and we have open at the moment around 280 young people who are children care are open to our service at the moment. The core premise really of the work that we do is very much focused on supporting the professional network in the first instance. So in order for a young person that has experienced trauma in their life, the first element really of any work before direct therapeutic intervention can take place is that grounding work and things around psychological safety, and that's the bit where our service supports the wider professional network, their carers, to support in putting those arrangements in place in the first instance before it would be appropriate to offer any direct intervention that might be appropriate in the longer term. We've continued to work through that, and the work programme, which I think is attached and included as well, just provides some examples of the work that's happened over the past year, including in 2009 running the Hear Me campaign, which was specifically focused around children in care, and that ended with exhibition in Basingstoke of the work that had happened during that year, and part of that was seeking feedback, for example, from young people who are in care. We've continued throughout the year to provide support in terms of training through examples including things like providing a stand at the annual foster care conference, supporting the planning and delivery of the Hampshire LGBT conference, continuing to support briefings with the virtual school, and continuing to offer trauma-informed training to a range of professionals, internal and external staff. So we also train our internal staff as well. In terms of some of the performance side of things, so in 2019-20 we received 136 referrals. In the NHS we measure all the contacts, so we delivered 3,722 contacts. We continue to experience real challenges with our waiting times across the whole of our service, and that is no different for young people who are in care. So the average waiting time for assessment at the end of March 2020 was around 19 weeks, and then 36 weeks for treatment. And to highlight, there has been recently agreed significant investment into our service, which is really positive and well needed. So it's in total £6.6 million of investment coming into the service, and to put that into a little bit of context, our current service value is around 15 million, and we have a staff group of around 250 people, and with that additional investment that will increase by around about 100. So you can see the kind of extent to the increases that will cover. And then alongside that, we are continuing to work in developing the mental health support teams in schools, which is a key national project. We've been successful in securing 2 teams in the southeast of Hampshire, which will be going live in the next few months, and there are new waves just about to be launched, and that's a fantastic project which is being supported by a range of agencies, including Hampshire County Council and the local authority. So there are some real positives that will be happening over the next 12, 18 months or so. In terms of some specifics which will also help support children in care, there'll be a new psychiatric liaison service embedded within the Hampshire hospitals, so Winchester and Basingstoke sites, which will of course support children in care who present at hospital. There'll be an enhanced crisis service within the community. So we have a service called I2I, which provides intensive home treatment within the community, and that's being significantly expanded, and again will be supporting children in care as well. And we've got significant investment going into the core CAMS services in order to increase capacity, access and reduce our waiting times alongside that. So over the next 12 to 18 months or so, there'll be significant expansion and enhancement of our services, which is fantastic news and really needed. I understand there are questions being asked around the impacts on mental health as a result of the pandemic, and they are really acutely being felt by our service at the moment. And I know that there have been increases in social care referrals as well, and we're seeing a similar level of increases within the children's mental health services too. So a number of young people being impacted around eating disorders, a number of young people, increasing numbers presenting in crisis. And so this funding has also been allocated to help support and respond to some of those challenges. I believe I probably covered everything that I wanted to, but obviously more than happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. I'm going to ask the first question. Are children in care a priority in relation to referrals, assessments and interventions? If so, how are they prioritised, I'm trying to say?
Yes, they are. So in terms of kind of like our contractual arrangements, they are prioritised as a discrete cohort of young people. The challenge that we have at the moment is that there are significant pressures across the whole service in terms of being able to respond to the increasing levels of need and demand, and we're having to balance that against the sort of clinical risks and presentations alongside recognising that we need to be prioritising children in care. Particularly around children in care, what we do see is that the young people who are in care and tend to wait slightly longer are for particular presentations. So children in care are tending to wait longer, for example, for an ADHD assessment, and that's where some of our longest waiters are. Now, with the additional funding that we've been provided with, one of the first cohorts that we will be managing are around providing those ADHD assessments. So again, that's an area where children in care will see a significant benefit in terms of reduced times for assessment.
Thank you. And just one other question, please. Is this report, you mentioned 220 quite a lot, is this report provided for the Corporate Parenting Board, the most up-to-date information regarding data, priorities and performance?
So the report that you've received is based on an annual internal children in care report, which is provided annually. In terms of performance measures, they are provided monthly to our commissioners, so there's monthly information on that. I can broadly give some updated figures if that would be helpful today. Now, if that would be helpful.
Yes, I think we'd like to receive them. We needn't do it today, but later on, please. We would like to know that.
Yeah. So in terms of just broadly around waiting times, so the average waiting time for initial assessment at the moment for those that haven't yet been assessed, i.e. are continuing to wait, is around about 20 weeks. And then for those that haven't started their treatment yet and are continuing to wait, it's around 40 weeks.
So when do you think that will improve?
So our broad plans with all of the additional investment we are seeing this as a 12 to 18 month project. It will take us at least 6 months to recruit the staff, and then it will take obviously longer to embed the model.
Okay, thank you for your answers. Councillor Carpenter.
Thank you very much. Yeah, a couple of questions, please. Do you actually track or report on outcomes specifically for children in care? And do you gather evidence of the impact of the service that they receive from you, specifically children in care? And also my second question is, at one of our meetings, some point in the past, I can't remember when it was, we heard that children in care sometimes don't get a service because they're not settled in their placement. They have to be settled down. And I just wondered then, if that is the case, then who is offering them support for mental health issues?
Thank you. So in terms of outcomes, it is something that we need to get better at as a service. So there are a number of clinical measures that we can use to track improvements in presentation. And it is something that is a national ambition, actually, and it's been impacted by COVID, but there are national targets for CAMS services to achieve in terms of how routinely we are recording on our information systems routine outcome measures. So I would expect over time that will improve, and then we will be able to measure outcomes against standardised clinical tools, which will help us be able to track improvement over time. At the moment, it stands at about, I think it's around, I don't know, something like 30% of the cases that are open to us have a paired measure where we can track progress over time. We want to obviously improve that quite significantly, and there are plans in place within the service to achieve that. And as I say, it's a national target. In terms of your second question and young people being settled in placement, yeah, I mean, in terms of the therapy and most effective treatments that we're able to provide, it goes back to what I was saying in the introduction, that there needs to be that psychological safety before being able to provide any direct therapeutic intervention. So in terms of the input that our service would provide, it would most likely be indirect input to the professional network and carers, and supporting them to put measures in place to enable in future that therapy to take place. But it's something that we continue to try and raise awareness of within the professional network through the things that we do around training and those sorts of things, because you have to have that basis in the first instance before you can move on to access a therapy which would be effective.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks.
Councillor Jackie Porter.
Thank you, and thank you, Dale. As you probably know, we receive a copy of a letter or written report to the Children's Services Scrutiny from CAMS, and we've asked to see that every time until we get to a point where we'll have a 3-month waiting list for autism services, which I think will probably reflect the general feeling for other services that CAMS is offering. So that's really important. I realise it's not the whole of the CAMS service, but that's where we've set our line. And it's really helpful to hear that you've had that injection of money. That's really good. But I note as well that, as Councillor Briggs just asked, that the situation is getting worse, not better. That previously it was 55 weeks before someone started their treatment, and now it's 60 weeks. So we are pulling that distance out now, as well as also having to deal with situations that were not there before. So my really hard question really is that, do you think that the poor record of CAMS being able to deal with this for funding reasons, I appreciate that, but the poor record of CAMS being able to deal with young people actually puts more risk of children going into the care system?
I'm not sure I'm able to answer that one. I mean, I can say broadly speaking, in terms of mental health, clearly the earlier the intervention, the more likely it is that we're going to be successful and improve outcomes and mental health for young people. I'm not sure I'm best placed to answer the question over whether or not that would increase the risk of children coming into care. I think that's probably multifactorial in it.
Is it something that the team considers? Because we've discussed in autism that, you know, it isn't always autism, that there are other reasons for young people displaying the behaviours they do. And I just wondered if it's even come into the conversation at CAMS, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, one of the one of the challenges, and you're quite right. The position in terms of our waiting times is deteriorating. The reality is, and the sadness is, for a significant and protracted period of time, mental health services haven't seen the investment that is needed to respond to the demand, and that's just a reality. The positive at the moment is that there is a national focus on children's mental health, and we've seen some funding flow over the past few years, and now we've got a significant investment coming through. I think the challenge is that, for example, with our initial assessment waiting list, whilst they're waiting, there is a risk that parents, carers and others perceive the issue to be a mental health one, and as a result, nothing else is going on for the young person, and actually during that time there is work that can be being done, and it may not be, you know, a core mental health concern that is causing the challenge or the circumstance for this particular young person. So I think the important thing is that we do need to reduce the waiting times for our service, so that we can be really clear in our formulation as to what is the need for that young person from a mental health perspective, and I think that is really key. The other aspect is, and I'm a great supporter of this national programme around the mental health support teams in schools, because that will be, once expanded, will be a great opportunity for there to be more presence within a school environment, to not just support individual young people, but also support the whole school ethos around mental health. And that's a key focus of that programme around the whole school approach. So that in itself will be a real positive. Again, the only regret is that the national target at the moment is 25% coverage over the next few years. But we are where we are. We want to increase the number of mental health support teams we have as fast as we can, and that's what we're working on as well.
And you, in fact, it was just alluded to with the fact that you don't tend to be working with someone until they're settled. And we do know before that we've had, I've been to children's homes where they've said, well, actually, we haven't got them into school, or we haven't got the situation. So does the eye-to-eye intensive home treatment actually manage to solve that, or does that not happen either until that young person has a school and a settled place for them?
The main focus of the eye-to-eye service is a intensive home treatment service. So we'll be managing acutely unwell young people within the community. I would suspect they don't work too regularly with children's homes directly. There may well be cases where they're involved, but it wouldn't be their main focus of work.
Right. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
I don't think there's any further questions. I'm going back to what Councillor Porter's just said. The reason I asked you about the report, how up to date it was, because it was almost the same report that we had read at Children and Young People. And it's just really to reiterate to you how desperate we are for our children to receive prompt treatment, because as Councillor Carpenter said, placements do break down because foster carers can't always cope, but they would if the child had more appropriate treatment. So I know you understand it's very difficult for all of us, but we would like our children to be seen earlier. So thank you very much, Lau.
Thank you.
Thank you. Members, can I have your agreed recommendation for this report, please? A verbal recommendation.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you, members.
Councillor Briggs, could I just ask that we have a particular paragraph related to children in care in our monthly report, in our report to children's scrutiny? Is that possible? Does it come from the same department or does it not? When Matthew Powell writes a written report for us, could we just have some opportunity to look at children in care in that paper?
Chairman, I don't think we could agree that's a formal recommendation because this is a different board to the select committee.
Right, okay.
It could be an informal request, or we could follow it up via email after the meeting. I don't think it's something the corporate parenting board can agree to put in place for the select committee.
Across rooms, we could do it in the select committee next time. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Emma. Our next item is the Fostering Annual Report presented by Sarah Smith.
Good afternoon, everybody. So the Fostering Annual Report is it gives an overall summary of fostering activity. A lot of the data is the 2019-2020 financial year. Statutory, we have to provide a fostering annual report, so we do so each financial year. I try to update the data as far as June for this report. Anything more than that, you'll see obviously in our next report that will come to you. So I'll just take you through a summary, really, and then obviously answer your questions. Service approved 31 fostering households in 2019 to 2020. We tried a number of new recruitment activities, which you'd have seen in the report. So we tried some supermarket information stands. We introduced a Hampshire Fostering Focus Week, and that is separate to the National Fostering Fortnight. We want something that's Hampshire based and at the opposite end of the year, so we really could create some profile around that. We had the Fostering Annual Survey in June 2020, which you'd have seen showed an increase in foster carer satisfaction. It does remain a focus. I'm not suggesting that we're where we want to be yet, but it was quite a significant increase in some areas. So that was really pleasing and kind of tells us we're on the right track. And we just need to focus on that a bit more this year. So our statutory responsibility in terms of our compliance data, we've got our data there for our foster carers annual reviews and regular supervision. In June, we were at 89% of household reviews that were in timescale, 94% of supervision visits in timescale, and 89% of unannounced visits in timescale for our foster carers. You'd have seen that medicals and DBSs still remain an area of focus. We had 78% compliance in our repeat medicals for foster carers and 88% compliance in our repeat DBS is for foster carer households. They are two areas that we continue to work on, and obviously medicals we are picking up as part of the MPP programme because it does affect our recruitment of foster carers as well in terms of making sure medicals are completed in a timely way. So our overall household foster carer household numbers remained fairly consistent. We were at 483 at June 2020, and that was from 485 at the same time the previous year. So we'd lost 2. It was fairly consistent. What we hadn't seen was really growth that we wanted, and that's obviously all tied up in the paper that you heard earlier, the Modernising Placement Programme, to really focus on that growth of foster carers, both retaining foster carers and growing our recruitment. I did point out some of the foster carer deregistrations that we had in the last year. Half of them were for really positive reasons. So we had lots of SGO, adoption and reunification outcomes. That was for 39 of the 80 that were deregistered. There were 3 in that cohort of 80 that deregistered that were dissatisfied with the service or commented some level of dissatisfaction. And I've talked about those within the report in more detail to look into those. Often it's about limitations of the foster carers and what they can provide. So some of them were dissatisfied around the number of placements and children they're able to look after is about their availability and limitations as well. But there was a payment issue within there, and obviously we've had I don't know if you'd have heard from the paper before, or it's in the paper before, the fostering work stream within the Modernising Placement Programme. There's a drive on the foster care payments and making sure that they're a bit more efficient and effective and timely for foster carers. So in the whole fostering service, which you'd have has all been touched upon earlier, so I won't go into all the detail, but there's a full fostering work stream which looks at the way we support foster carers, the training we provide to them, financial support for foster carers, and really just trying to drive that forward in terms of our recruitment and retention of foster carers to give better placement choice. We've tried a few new things more recently, such as Sky TV ads and things like that for our recruitment, which have been really positive. And we've just rolled out a whole programme of online foster carer claims, so the foster carers can go in and access their expenses claims online themselves, which has been really positive. And I think the report also just talks about a couple of new training packages that we had for foster carers in 2019 to 2020. We are just reviewing the training pathway again as part of the Modernising Placement Programme, and really linking with our residential colleagues, with the thinking that often these are the same children, so we need to provide the same level of training. Foster carers are managing sort of more complex issues, and we need to provide them with the adequate skills and training to meet those needs. So that's a really whistle-stop summary of the report, but I'm absolutely happy to answer questions about any points you particularly want to know more about.
Thank you, Sarah. Apologies for the bang just now. The dog came back in from her walk. I don't see any hands up for you, Sarah. Councillor Philpott.
Thank you, Chairman. There seems to be a bit of a delay on my computer. I press the button and sort of nothing happens for a few seconds, and then suddenly, you know, so it didn't look as though it was going to work. Yeah, can I just ask a question relating to the recruitment campaign? And I've noticed the adverts, for example, on the radio for foster carers. On your report, you said that throughout 2019-20 there were advertisements not just on radio but social media as well, resulted in 17 inquiries. What are you able, with any accuracy, to say what result there came from those 17 inquiries? And not only that, how do we compare with, say, other areas? And are we getting the value for money in terms of sort of return you would have liked or would have expected from that kind of coverage? So I'll talk to you a bit about conversion rate first. So our conversion rate from inquiry to an approved foster carer always shocks people that are outside the service. So conversion rate would usually sit around sort of 6% conversion rate. So that's all you get from your huge number of initial inquiries. You'll get through 6%. The year 1920, it was around the 6%, and then we managed to get it to about 8%, which is quite typical nationally. Really pleasingly, this year, and as of last month, we were at 12.5% due to our kind of targeted marketing and all the research that went into our marketing messages and how we market, which was part of the Modernising Placements Programme. We used a lot of research-based evidence. That was really, really positive. In terms of the social media, we didn't have the accuracy I would have said before. So we know just from people that come through. What we have now, which was it's about 3 months ago this came into be, we've got a microsite, and any IT people will probably correct me if I'm saying any of this wrong. So this is my understanding of the microsite. When we have a specific campaign on social media, it will have a link through to that microsite. With that, we're able to look at which campaigns produce the most interest and then produce the most inquiries through our website. And we now have the ability for foster carers to immediately download an information pack. So they don't have to ring us for that. We wanted to put up front lots of information to foster carers so that we had that as a starting point for them. We're also able then to track the actual people that would download an information pack to those that come then through for an actual assessment to be undertaken. So we're just starting to get some early data on that. It's about 3 months in. So by the end of this quarter, we should really have a lot of data
that tells us which campaigns are more successful, how many of those that are downloading information packs are then going through to actually having an assessment completed and then approval. So it's early stage of that data, but the new microsite has given us a lot more than we've ever had before. So we'll be able to really target our messages.
Chairman, can I just come back on that just for clarification so that I've understood? Thank you very much for the answer. And it's not I'm not blaming or pointing any fingers. I just wanted to clarify this so I understand it correctly. But where it says that the campaign included activity on radio, social media, print distribution of printed literature, and information events each day across the county. And out of that, 17 inquiries with a 6% roughly take up. So that would be that my guess. I mean, I'm just trying my math correctly. Sounds like it's one person will come out of that. You get one person.
Yes, a lot of the activity that we do is about brand awareness, and what we know from our marketing colleagues is that you don't really you don't take any action until about the 7th time you've heard the message. So all of those little bits, we wouldn't have necessarily heard those messages then, though that could have been the first time they heard the message or even the 3rd time, but it might be another month or so before they've got to the point of hearing that message and that brand awareness enough that they're then taking action.
Okay, I obviously want to know a bit more about that, Chairman, but it doesn't sound to me as though this is necessarily the most fruitful way of advertising. I mean, it doesn't seem to be particularly successful, and one thing I don't think I found in the report was how much that all cost to carry out that advertising campaign throughout the year. But what I'm getting at here is I wonder whether there is a more nuanced, a more targeted and a more sort of intelligent way of directing resources in particular areas for recruitment. Maybe even going to existing foster carers for people who they may know who would trust them and know them as foster carers and so on and so forth. That is so word of mouth, so to speak, may be potentially more fruitful. That was my only question, really.
Yeah, I think Stuart's trying to give you a reply.
I am. I mean, I take the point, Councillor Philpott. It's not a big return for that, but we need to see this in the context of there being a national shortage of foster carers, of the local authority being in competition with the independent sector, who I have to say are exceptionally rigorous in their approach to recruiting foster carers, and they will have exceptionally large marketing budgets. As part of our Modernising placements programme that you heard about as the first item, we're taking a whole different approach around foster carers, and part of that will be the recruitment. And my own view is, I have social workers leading on recruitment. Actually, social workers are social workers, and we need marketing people to do that for us. And that may be that we need to engage with some outside companies, for example, who are experts in that domain. So I think you're right to raise the issue. We sort of take it on the chin, really. There's a lot more to do here, but I think we've been trying to do it from a children's services perspective, and I think we may need to do it from a marketing perspective.
I think.
Sorry, Chairman. Thanks for that. It wasn't intended to put any blame on anyone. It wasn't accusatory. It was merely sort of a query as to whether we are necessarily pursuing the most fruitful lines of sort of inquiry, if you like.
No, and I can assure you it was taken as a positive challenge from my perspective. It's absolutely right that if it's not delivering what we need to, then we need to do something different.
Yeah. I'll just add a quick comment, because obviously we started with the Modernising Placement Programme. We are now, our marketing officer is now sat in with the corporate marketing team to give us a bit more of that expertise and to give us a bit more of that steer. And just coming back to that 17 inquiries, you asked about how that compares. So that's 17 inquiries for 1 week, but for 1 week that to us was quite a success, because that was for that fostering focus week. And I think that I have the links with other local authorities, so the sort of surrounding areas. They would absolutely agree that for 1 week's input, that was quite a significant return. So national, in terms of, I can't talk nationally, but in terms of our local, like our South regional group, so that they would agree that was quite a significant return on 1 week.
Thank you, Sarah. Councillor Jackie Porter.
Thank you. When I looked at the numbers of people that you had to find emergency accommodation for, I was absolutely stunned by the number that you're having to cope with. So in February, if you look at the 1 to 2 day as well as the on the day, 76, and in September 86, and there were many in between those two. And I just wondered, are you within that time or within those particularly high periods, are you at risk of having to take unregistered places? Having to place in unregistered places.
Shall I answer that?
Thank you.
We don't have any. I need to make the distinction here around unregistered. So we don't use unregistered placements. Unregistered placements are illegal. They are where children are placed in unregistered children's homes, and we don't do that. We place 16 and 17-year-olds in non-regulated.
Yeah,
I understand. They're not covered by it, but we still regulate them ourselves. Are we at risk of it? Well, no. I have to say no. But it comes close to us having to look at every single option, and sometimes that will mean social workers are with a young person till 8, 9 o'clock at night whilst they're phoning around their friends and their families, trying to find somewhere very short term for that young person to go. That's the nature of our work, unfortunately. A lot of it is reactive because crises happen, and in a county the size of Hampshire, that happens a lot. So that's a constant issue for us. Sometimes as well, these are placements where children are already in placement and they break down, and that's challenging. So, for example, a good example would be where a young person is refusing to socially distance, and the foster carers are clinically vulnerable. So, what they might say, we just can't carry on like this. We then have to respond and make sure that that young person's safe. What I would say is my staff are incredibly creative. Over Christmas, we had some really difficult situations to the point where residential staff volunteered to look after a child on their own who was showing all the signs of COVID, and his mother had in fact been diagnosed with COVID. Now they went over and above in my view, and that's the sort of thing that staff are doing on a day-to-day basis. But we don't use unregistered provision.
I do understand the difference between unregistered and unregulated. I was asking specifically unregistered. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Wade.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I just explore this sort of situation, crisis situation? Because in the report it says 48% of foster carers are independent; they're not in-house, and it says that figure tends to stay the same year on year. The questions are, clearly, obviously, there must be more expensive doing it that way. But if we get a crisis situation, is it easier to get an independent? I know we've obviously not got enough in-house to meet our demand, but is it actually easier to get an independent one? Because that's a question I asked in a previous item about children being placed, young people being placed out of region. Is it how it works? It's easier to go to an agency and get an independent one. Oh well, with their place, that solves that problem. The reason I ask is because we're in this situation where it's 48-52. And we never seem to get out of it. And if the volume goes up, as it might do, then presumably that percentage won't go up unless we have an increase in bringing in new foster carers in-house, which I know you're doing your best, and I'm not, you're not criticising in that respect. I'm just trying to understand the dynamic of how this works in the critical situation and how this works going forward, because no doubt the mental health in young people as a result of the lockdown, the pandemic, and we're going to have another peak when we come out of this lockdown. I think Stuart explained that to me before. It's once we get out of a lockdown, we have a peak. Does that mean that we're going to have a situation where we're going to need more independent foster carers because we haven't got enough in house? Do you see what I'm trying to ask in this? I'm sorry if I've not been very articulate with the question.
It is a good question. Actually, I think it's easier to place in-house in a crisis. I can see Sarah nodding her head. We have relationships with our foster carers, and they might say, "Okay, I will temporarily take another child." We know our foster carers who are more flexible and adaptable, who will help out in a crisis. So, in a crisis, I think we look in-house. We always look in-house first, but certainly in a crisis we do. And we also have carers that are willing to take children out of hours, because this doesn't happen between 9 and 5. It's typically happening in the evenings, early hours, and over the weekends. And we have some really fabulous foster carers who are really flexible like that. In terms of I do expect another peak. All of the signs are the same. So the first week or 2 weeks of lockdown 3, if I can describe it as such, we saw a small reduction in demand at the front door. That's picked up again and is at or above normal already. So by the time we exit this lockdown, I do expect it to be reaching a peak again. In terms of, I think there's a slight difference now, and this might go back to the 52-48. What we're not seeing this time, as opposed to lockdown 1, is really large numbers of children coming into care. And I think there's a number of reasons for that. I think more services around vulnerable children are remaining open, and I use schools as the best example of that. But other services as well, CAMS, as our CAMS colleagues have adapted to working in restrictions, as have a number of other agencies. I think in the first lockdown, families, for whatever reason, felt and experienced being very alone, and then went into crisis. I think as a society, but certainly as a professional partnership around vulnerable children, I think we've all adapted our services to keep things ticking over as best we can, if I can use that phrase. So I'm not expecting a deluge of children coming into care, but I am expecting a peak of referrals. I may get proved wrong on the former, but I hope not. And the whole purpose of, again, going back to our Modernising Placements programme, is to keep growing our foster carers. If you remember, and it seems a long time ago now, up to the beginning of lockdown 1, over the 2 years prior to that, there had been a 5% national increase in the numbers of children coming into care. Hampshire, we had bucked that trend and we had a 4% decrease. So up until the pandemic, all of the ingredients were there that our 48-52 would actually swing more strongly in favour of the local authority, and we will be using less independent foster carers. Clearly, the pandemic has set it back. It's disrupted it in the short term. Once we get back into that place, then I'm confident that we'll have enough in-house resource and won't need to keep upping our independent usage. I hope that answers the questions, Councillor Wade.
It does, thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. I don't see any more hands up. In your report, you mentioned training for panel members, and I would just like to tell you that 4 were arranged very quickly, and they are absolutely excellent.
Oh, that's very good to hear.
Yes, I thought I would tell you it is some of the best training I've had. So thank you, and thank you for your report.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Members, can I have your support for the recommendation, please, the verbal report?
Yes.
Agreed.
Thank you. And that brings us to the end of the Corporate Parenting Board. Thank you very much, members, and thank you, officers.